trans athletes are competing in women's divisions and pretty much cleaning it out.
2 transgender athletes winning 4 gold medals in women's competitions.
Watching a man fight a woman. That's what I was watching.
Trans women are real women, just like any other women.
Silverberg came through and said, I feel like a woman today. I'm gonna squat 3,000 pounds and just crush the record. Nate the Lawyer is a YouTube creator who just recently released a video entitled Women Quit to Avoid Fighting Men. League bans trans women to avoid shutdown. Now, coincidentally, a few days back, I posted a Instagram story where I discussed this new prevalent situation where trans athletes are competing in women's divisions and pretty much cleaning it out. Now, there's exceptions. There are situations that we'll get into in a second where female athletes are submitting these trans women who are coming into the division. But by and large, the trans athletes tend to clean house when it comes to competition against biological women. Now, we'll get far more detailed in the next few minutes, but let's just get into it.
Women boycott martial arts competition rather than compete against biological men. They say they fear for their lives. This is the North American Grappling Association, the NAGA.
We call it NAGA, by the way. And just a quick story. My first competition ever was at NAGA in 2002. So I have an intimate history and obviously a 20+ year history, not just with jiu-jitsu, but with NAGA specifically.
Now, their former trans inclusion policy allowed biological men to compete against biological women. Now, this has led to an uproar. See, several female martial artists have withdrawn from recent competitions due to their concerns about facing transgender athletes.
You know what I'm saying? If you can imagine a situation where you maybe have a daughter, girlfriend, or wife that you love dearly, and they go to compete, and then they have to deal with just the biological advantage of going against a man, it's very, very difficult. And now, again, this is objective. This is regardless of where you stand on the political spectrum. Let's look at this podium. Don't use your ideology. Look at the podium.
Let's just keep it real. This is not weightlifting. This isn't track and field, but combat sports where competitors are trying to physically hurt each other. Now, we have seen in the past where biological men have dominated women's events in the name of inclusion and diversity. But this ignores the reality that men have physical advantages over women.
It's what we do. Team man, though, for real, though. No, I'm just kidding. No jokes aside. If you have never competed before, and I said this in my stories, I said it pretty viciously, but you should shut your mouth because you don't know what it means to get your arm cranked behind your back by a man. So me being a man and having trained and competed my entire life, we're not actively trying to hurt each other, but we kind of are trying to hurt each other. In a competition, I gotta force you to say, I surrender to your will. Men have denser bones. We have a different spatial awareness. We've been able to track that cognitively. We know that to be true. So when you put a man in a situation where his goal is to try to break a woman, he usually is able to do that.
But that was not what was going on here. What was going on here was this woman who used to be a man for 32 years transitioned to being a woman and it didn't tell anybody and fought 2 different women who thought they were fighting a woman and got been smashed. Well, I was watching it. It was like watching a man fight a woman. That's what I was watching. I was like, this isn't like particularly, she wasn't particularly skillful. It wasn't like she had like some unbelievable background in judo, like Ronda Rousey or something like that. It wasn't that. You were just literally watching a former man beat up women who never had the benefit of 30 years plus of testosterone in their body.
This is an important detail. So the women that were competing at NAGA were not being told that the person they were going against was a biological male. So that's another thing that grinds my gears. It's one thing to say, all right, this is a trans athlete. You have an option. Do you want to compete against them? You can elect not to do it. Maybe go compete in a different division. I don't know the deal. But these women, or these girls in most cases, were not even being told that they were competing against a biological male. So that's another sort of ethical conundrum that we find ourselves in.
Even with these facts, the North American Grappling Association allowed biological men to compete against biological women in jiu-jitsu. So the women started complaining because they were scared out of their mind. Now, the old policy only asked competitors to identify as a male or female without the option to declare a transgendered status. So trans women signed up because the rule allowed them to. You only had to, quote, identify as a woman. Now, remember earlier this year, the Canadian Powerlifting Union had a similar policy, and trans lifter Annie Andrews, a biological male, set the women's powerlifting record. Now, remember, another man, Avi Silverberg, went and just said that he identified as a woman and shattered Annie's record to show the absurdity of allowing biological men to hold women's records.
Comedy. We're talking about comedy now. This is real life that's happening. My man Silverberg came through and said, I feel like a woman today. I'm gonna and squat 3,000 pounds and just crush the record. Wild times we live in.
The North American Grappling Association had the same policy, leading to transgender athletes winning 4 gold medals in women's competitions, and another transgender grappler winning second place.
Now, it's important to note that a super technical female, in some cases, will be able to submit a not as experienced, not as technical male. So it's not always cut and dry in that regard, but it becomes scary when the skill level is matched. When the technique is matched, the man tends to win based on physicality. So that's what you see in most cases. It's also important to note that you really can't put the onus purely on the trans athlete. And I like that Naga is taking accountability for this. Now, I don't know if this is widespread across jiu-jitsu, like Grappling Industries, other regional competitions. As far as I'm concerned, this was more prevalent in Naga for whatever reason. I could be wrong on that.
Several women have voiced their concerns about the safety of competing against transgendered women due to the uneven matchups. Trans women are bigger, stronger. They are essentially men. The women were so concerned that they withdrew from the major tournaments to avoid facing biological men. Now, as a result, the North American Grappling Association had to revisit its rules. Now, transgender females can only compete against men. Now, this decision comes after complaints about transgender females participating in recent events. One competitor shared a video of her fighting a significantly heavier transgendered athlete. While she won, her coach expressed concerns about potentially severe injuries.
Now, I actually covered that match on a YouTube short. You may have seen it, you may have not. But yes, that young lady, the small girl, actually ended up winning and submitting the much bigger biological male. And the comments are pretty intense on that video. But regardless, I think the issue with posting videos like that and why I've stopped doing it is because people who champion the trans agenda, which I think is completely fine, it's up to you how you want to spend your time. I just think videos like that end up supporting the inclusion of transgender females competing against biological females. In my opinion, that's the wrong message. Of course, there's going to be exceptions where a small, super technical, super experienced woman is going to beat a trans athlete. But again, by and large, as you saw on those podiums, a trans athlete's going to steal a lot of medals and they're going to dominate a lot of women. Let's keep going.
Jaden Alexander, another competitor, expressed her distress after fighting a transgendered woman in July. She described the experience as horribly scary.
I mean, just look at the physicality. Just look at it.
Emphasized the need for rules and regulations to ensure women's safety.
Okay, so if you think that what you're seeing in this video is a bunch of conjecture, let's actually go to more of a subjective experience of a young lady who had to compete against a trans athlete.
I am sure you have seen the posts about the trans-identified males who have been signing up and competing in the women's brackets at a few jiu-jitsu events over the past couple of months. Being one of the women who competed against one of them and spoke out about it, I just wanted to get on here and share my experience. I competed against a trans-identified male on Jiu-Jitsu 8 at a submission challenge in Marietta, Georgia, where he registered in my blue belt women's absolute division. It did not take me very long into my match for me to realize that I was not, in fact, competing with a woman. To say the experience was horrible and scary. I was absolutely in fight or flight mode, and as a seasoned competitor, I can honestly say I've never been there mentally before in a match. I've been in spots where I've been subbed, and I've never felt unsafe during a match. After my match, I literally went to the mat side while my teammates were massaging on my arms, and I just could not help but cry and look at my coach and say, that was a man. But despite winning via rear naked choke in overtime, I was devastated, to say the least, by what I had just experienced. It really negatively affected my next match. In the upcoming months, when I went to compete again, I had to self-exclude from a World Series of Jiu-Jitsu and from a women's absolute bracket at a Naga to avoid competing with not one but 2 trans male athletes. I kind of felt silly for not speaking up about it sooner, other than like commenting and arguing on Ansley's post about it. But honestly, I just didn't know what to do at first. The fear and reservations that most women have, which is to be called a transphobic bigot who just wants to hate on people. And if you know me personally, you know that is not the case at all. The simple fact of the matter is that men signing up in a combat sport to fight women is absolutely unacceptable. We don't deserve to be having to self-exclude from competitions to avoid fighting men. And we deserve for there to be rules and regulations put into place that keep us safe and that protect us from these situations happening in the first place. And that is what ultimately led me to work with Icon.
Yes, the Riley Gaines tweet is the one that I actually responded to and posted in my Instagram story that I referenced earlier. I became aware of this, just wild times.
Because it's something that needs to change, and I'm really glad that I did. Work has been so uplifting. It's been great, and the feedback is, oh my God, it's literally just been wonderful. And then the fact that NAGA, not even 24 hours later, changed their policy.
Shout out to Kip Kohler. He's the CEO of NAGA.
It's been a breath of fresh air.
Now, that's the thing. People don't want to come out and talk about this because you will seem bigoted, like this young lady suggested. And as you know, if you follow my community posts or you're a member of the newsletter, by the way, link down below, you know that I focus on sovereignty and I focus on the self. I believe that if we can change ourselves, then we can influence the people around us, our supporters online, for instance, even. And that's how you perpetuate change. But trying to politically lever things and get into these fights online about ideology, I find that you can never really change a person's mind once they made it up. They have to come to their own realization, and the political machine moves so slowly. To invest your time when you only have a few decades on this planet is probably not a good use of your time. So this video is a rare exception, and really it's because this is my wheelhouse. This is my zone of genius, if you will. I've done this my entire life. I've trained both women and men, and there is a big physical difference. There's no argument about that. That's objective reality.
The American Grappling Association believes that some transgender athletes might have been competing by simply marking female on the registration forms without anyone noticing. Now, with women straight up boycotting the events, what are they going to do? Well, they've decided to change the policy. Their policy now states, we will have divisions for only biological females. Transgender females will not be entered into these divisions. Then it goes on to say transgender females must compete in the men's division. So the new policy makes it very clear that biological men cannot compete with biological women, and trans women must compete in the men's division. Now, trans activists calls this transphobic and exclusive. Trans women are real women, just like any other women. Now listen, I'm all for inclusion and diversity, but there is a line. We have a women's category for a reason, and pretending that men don't have physical advantages over women is ridiculous.
That's part of my issue. If you say let's start a trans female and a trans male division separate from the female and male, a trans activist will consider that to be exclusive. But the truth of the matter is it's exclusive to a female biologically when you add a man into that division who now identifies as a woman who's had 20 plus years of testosterone coursing through their veins. Who's being excluded now? And this is not really a feminist rant, but it's true to some extent. Women just get the short end of the stick, and it's been happening since antiquity. They can't catch a break. First it was men versus women. Now it's men who identify as women beating up women. It's like the women cannot catch a break. It's just the way it is. You know, it's up to women to speak up, and it seems to be happening. Guys, there needs to be some sort of rubric that we follow, some sort of rooted truth, objectively speaking, so that we have a compass to follow. Otherwise, the walls of reality dissolve, and we're left in a bizarro land where nothing means anything. If we're not careful, truth is gonna dissolve. There will be no objectivity. At that point, existentialism is the law. And if there is no meaning, if there's no truth, then what the are we doing here? There has to be some sort of guideline that we can all agree on that goes, this is just real. This is not real. We don't live in a cartoon. Anyway, the point of this video is not to bastardize anyone or to punch down, because that's never the goal of this channel here. And it's just not who I am as an individual. But I do think it's the responsibility of an expert to speak up when they see something like this happening. But more than anything, I want to know your guys' opinion. Do you feel like I'm off base with this, or do you, for the most part, agree that there should be a separation of trans athletes and biological females? Now, someone very close to me made a great point. They say you don't see very many biological females who are transitioning to becoming a male trying to compete in the males division. I don't see that. I don't think they like that, but you like this video. Damn. I got it in at the very end. A lot of you guys thought that I was not the Segway King. I had to put the crown back on. Strangle Gang, as always, stay strong. I'll see you in the next one.